Hello and welcome to this episode of the You, Me and ADHD podcast. Today we have Brett Harrington, an Auckland-based coach who specialises in ADHD, and she's a counsellor as well and runs her own practice called ADHD Sorted. We have a fantastic conversation. We've just wrapped up our chat and we've talked about a myriad of things around adults with ADHD, kids with ADHD. We'll refer to the difference or not between ADD and ADHD. We talked about the importance of self-acceptance and self-knowledge when we have ADHD, and how Brett's take is that ADHD doesn't have to be a big deal, which is a great approach. She talks about it being this tiny bit of who we are. However, it's such an intense little bit, and it's that intensity that can have both positive and negative impacts. We talk about whether ADHD is a disability or not as well, and towards the end we also get into what workplaces need to do in order to accommodate ADHD. But this one's focused purely and mainly on the adult with ADHD and how we flip our mindset from it being an inconvenience or a struggle or a deficit to how can I harness what comes naturally, which is indeed the whole point of this podcast. So enjoy this episode.
You know, you might be able to shoot lasers out of your eyes, but unless you learn to control that, it's just obnoxious.
Well, welcome everyone to this episode of You, Me and ADHD. As you know, we are an unashamedly positive take on what it means to live, work and thrive as an ADHD positive person, especially an ADHD positive professional. We talk about kids and adults and parents and all sorts of things going on there, but we are focused mainly on what's it like to work with ADHD and to hack your ADHD so that it's not necessarily the disorder that the name or the label suggests, but it's something that adds to how you experience the world and have fun with it. And today, I think we're going to have a whole lot of fun. We have Brett Harrington all the way from Auckland, and as you know, I'm in Dunedin, so we're sort of bookending the country at the moment. Brett is an ADHD specialist coach. She is a counsellor, and she works, as I believe, for yourself, Brett, as well as with a bunch of other partnership organisations. You run ADHD Sorted, and we'll get into that. And what I love about your profile is, as I was stalking you online in the lead up to this chat, Brett, we were looking through various profiles of you, and there was this common theme that kept coming up in a line that said that when we try to function in a way that we've been told that we should, in inverted commas, we often meet with frustration and failure, and it's better to work in harmony with our true nature and our talents. And that's exactly what my philosophy is around ADHD and has been over the last couple of years, and so I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you. So without further ado and rantings and rumblings on my part, welcome along Brett Harrington. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and I really like your introduction.
Oh, very good. Well, I just keep on talking, so it's a matter of you just cutting in, I think. So let's see how this one goes. Brett, where are you from originally with that accent?
That's a tricky question to ask, or to answer, I should say. The short answer is I'm from the U.S., but it's,
Should we leave it there?
I was actually born in Washington, D.C., which isn't even a state. So I can't say I'm from a state. But really, my origins are all up and down the eastern seaboard, but I was actually raised in the Caribbean.
Oh, wow.
In the Virgin Islands.
Yeah. And how long have you been in New Zealand?
For 15 years.
Okay, yeah. And this is home?
Oh, yeah. It's home now.
Very good.
It's home now. I'm a Kiwi now.
Good for you.
It's. I just wanted to clarify something. It's that you introduced me as an ADHD management specialist coach, and I call myself a coach because that's kind of what people expect to look for when they want help for ADD. And I started out with taking my training from the ADHD Coach Academy back in the US, actually, which was kind of ironic, but and not far from where I used to live. But I'm actually more of a therapist.
Okay.
And there's a reason for that. I felt like that approach better met my clients' needs.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
I'm kind of all those things all rolled into one.
absolutely. And I love how you've made that distinction and the correction there. And you did right that people think I need a coach, and your approach is more around therapy, so it's a bit more holistic. I
Yes,
imagine. Yeah.
yes, I like
Yeah.
to think
Okay.
so. Yes.
Right. So, what does that distinction mean for you then, and how you operate?
Well, I think that points to how I look at what I do when I'm working with ADD. So when an individual comes to me, it's a very good chance that they've already had quite a bit of therapy, maybe some counseling. They may have gone to a psychologist, psychiatrist. They may have been treated for anxiety or depression or even ADD, have maybe even have been taking medication, but they've kind of tried everything and things still really aren't quite ticking over
Mm-hmm.
as they'd like. So when an individual like that comes to me, I think of myself as working at three different things. There's a difference, a disability, and what can happen when you have difference and disability, which can lead to like psychological problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of think of myself as working on all three levels at once because they're all interconnected. And if you can make some progress in one area, you make progress in the other areas. So
Yeah.
the difference really can tend to affect self-esteem. The disability, I think of that as the easy part.
Mm-hmm.
You know, once we recognize what the problem is, it's like, oh, problem solve. Okay, we can get past that. And then when you take care, when you sort of, work with the disability and the difference, a lot of the psychological kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah. Can you talk a wee bit more about the term disability? Because
Yeah,
I have I have this almost visceral reaction
yeah,
to this being referred to as a disability. Now,
yeah,
I get that there are certainly some disabling characteristics. Um,
sure.
However, I really struggle with it being labelled as a disability. Do you get that a bit?
Yeah, of course, of course. So, so the thing is that, first of all, I just want to say that ADHD is incredibly treatable. So, I sometimes will say to my clients, hey, if you're going to have something in the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, this is the one to
Yeah.
have because it's incredibly treatable. And congratulations, you actually have a superpower.
Mm,
Okay. So, you know, sometimes I'll kind of, I like to make my sessions as fun as possible. And
yeah.
so I tell stories and try to make, you know, have a good time. And sometimes I'll tell my clients, hey, look, you might be able to shoot lasers out of your eyes, but unless you learn to control that, it's just obnoxious.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of times what I see is people who have tried really hard, number one, to operate the way they thought they should. In the meantime, their superpowers are running amok.
Mm,
Okay.
mm,
All right. And at the end of the day, what it means is that they're having difficulty making their intentions match their outcomes.
yeah. That's a great
Okay.
line. Yeah.
And in the middle there is a disability, a struggle to make your intentions match your outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Another metaphor, I use heaps of metaphors. Another metaphor I like is suppose you came into the world, oh, I don't know, missing a few digits on your right hand. Okay. But it's invisible. Nobody can tell. You think you've got five. Everyone thinks you've got five digits on your right hand. And so every time you go to pick something up, and half the time it ends up on the floor, but nobody knows why, and you feel bad and you get blamed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as somebody says, hey, buddy, you've only got three digits on that hand, so you're going to have to adjust the way you pick things up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Easy peasy. Just from now on, do it this way, not that way. And you're away.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
problem solved. But until you know and realize and accept, oh, I see what's happening there. Okay, you're going to keep dropping things on the floor.
Yeah, yeah, that's right, and it's that, and I think that's what an assessment and confirmation or a diagnosis of ADHD is so useful, because there's this hunch or there's a suspicion or there's this feeling that that something a whole lot of things that are tricky that you notice other people don't find tricky, or there's there's an awareness of what's going on, but you can't quite put your finger on it, and
That's right.
that in itself can be quite meaningless, or it could be incredibly debilitating in terms of your self-esteem and your mental health, etc., and a whole lot of other things. And so getting some sort of confirmation or not that it could be something else, right?
Yeah.
I find it as very, very useful. You don't do any of the diagnosing, but you help with afterwards, or if why do people come to you, is it in particular adults?
Yeah. So no, I don't assess. And just a quick note, I like how you have said that for some people it's an issue, and some people it's simply not. And yeah, there's a lot of people out there with probably with ADD, and it's just not a problem. And yay,
Yeah, yeah,
you know. And like I said earlier, people come to me because it's not working out. They're still not managing to make their
right.
intentions match their outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
I remember once talking to a woman, very successful, a businesswoman, and she was an author and a speaker and all this stuff. And she's like, I want to book in, and I'll have you talk to my personal assistant. And, we'd had a nice chat. And so I felt comfortable to say, personal assistant, what do you need me for?
Yeah.
And she said, I'm tired of it.
Mm.
I'm tired of not being able to keep certain things together.
Mm-hmm.
And so we met, and she was very, very quick. It didn't take long. She cottoned on really quickly
Right.
because, as I said, this is incredibly treatable. There's just a few key strategies, skills, ways of looking at things. And once we do a little tweaking here
Mm-hmm.
and there, most everybody is boom, they're away.
Mm. So do most people come to you where in a state of something's not quite right, or are people in a state of crisis? They're at the end of their tether, or is it a whole spectrum?
Well, yeah, it kind of runs between not quite right and I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
And I'm about to lose my job, or I'm about to fail out of uni.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, people tend to get in touch with me when they're kind of up against the wall.
Mm.
And that's right when we usually do those things, when we've tried everything
Yeah.
and they're like, right, this still isn't working. What else can I do?
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
is your take is your take on this, that it can be turned into a strength as opposed to trying to mitigate what's not working for you?
Tell you what, I think, again, an analogy, if I could, this might help you understand. When people come to me, I think of what I do, again, as I said before, as I'm helping them make their intentions match their outcomes. I don't really care if you have a diagnosis. I don't really care, just if this isn't working out, I think I could help you with that. So what I think of what I do is with them, because they have to become an expert on how they function.
Yeah.
And a lot of us haven't really understood or taken the time to really notice, how do I function? Okay, so together we're building like a bespoke engine that's going to help them go. So I think of it this way. Neurotypical people are like automatic vehicles, right? There's as young cars, they were taught to get in and put the key in the ignition and step on the gas and away they went, Us not neurotypical people were like unique standard shifts. So when we get that information, ignition, gas, what happens? We stall, we lurch, we judder, nothing goes. We don't really know why. Or sometimes we go like crazy, we run off the road. We don't really know how to drive this unique standard shift. Okay. So my clients and I together, we figure out how to drive their unique standard shift. And I don't know, I can't look under the hood, but I can kind of tell you, look, you know what? You probably have a clutch and you definitely have gears. And there's going to be some feathering going on here. You're going to have to pay attention. When do you slow down? When do you speed up? When do you drop into first, go into second? Okay. They have to figure out how to drive their car. And together we build that understanding, that engine. What are the pieces we need to drop in here? And then they're away. They're away with all the automatics. And they're a little more interesting too.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
But they're never going to be automatics. They're always going to have to anticipate. And then if they take their eyes off what they're doing or lose focus, they're going to grind their gears.
I think that's a fantastic analogy because, and especially where you say you're never going to be an automatic, there's the acceptance of that where people struggle and strive to be like others when they never can, but that doesn't mean they will never be as good or be able to operate more seamlessly or even better. Not that it's a competition, but and I loved how you mentioned that we need to notice more about ourselves, because what we have an ability to do is notice so much all the time, yet we don't necessarily take the time to notice and focus inward on how we operate and what we can change. And that's where we I think that's where we get quite stuck in that, as we're observing everything that's going on, and there's a bit of a comparison going on, but not necessarily taking that time to focus inward on, okay, what can I master? What can I change? What can I tweak?
Yeah. Exactly. And we don't always understand that we have permission. We have permission to go, okay, this is tricky. And how am I going to make this easier and simpler for me?
Yeah. Can I pick up on one distinction that you've made all the way through this chat so far, Brett, is you often refer to ADD and ADHD. What's your take on the difference, if there is one, in your mind, and also before I forget, I really do want to get into your journey as well and your background, because I cut you off as well. So could we start with the distinction and then we go back a wee bit?
So don't worry about cutting me off. I'm an avid interrupter, so I'm in no position to judge.
Awesome.
Our thoughts and ideas about or our understanding about ADHD is constantly evolving. So I try to keep up with all the latest, and I will often listen to webinars from the big brains, mainly in the U.S., about what are the current thinking about ADD. And to the best of my understanding, our current thinking about ADHD is there is no distinction, really, between ADD and ADHD. So some individuals, especially at a young age, will display the hyperactivity. And some people, like your first guest,
Peter Shankman.
Yes. I mean, obviously, he's going like 120 kph. That's his operating speed. Okay. Others of us also with ADD may seem to be going 45. Okay. But the hyperactivity tends to shift from something outward and identifiable to something inward.
Yeah.
And you're still going too fast. You still have the impulsivity. You still have the tendency to rocket off one way or another without pausing to go through all the gates, all the cognitive gates, so there's your interrupting and so forth and so on. But there's still that hyperactivity. So my understanding is it's interchangeable. Doesn't really matter. I tend to say whatever sort of fits into the sentence best.
Yeah, nice. That's good. I think that's the way to do it, rather than get hung up on do we use the H or not. like it's horses for courses and whatever works, and people know what you're. It's like with dyslexia. When I have dyslexia, if I misspell something, but somebody can still read it or get what I know, what I meant, then does it matter? I
Yeah,
argue it
yeah,
doesn't.
yeah. I've been writing a blog um, um, for ADHD New Zealand, and I'm almost through. And I said to someone, I'll need to run it by somebody for grammar and syntax,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm one of the people who have plenty to say, but don't necessarily fully understand how to write
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I get that.
So yeah, I just run it by somebody else. Does this hold together? Does this entirely make sense? And yeah, and spelling, of course. Yeah,
Well,
dyslexic as well, and probably dyscalculia and a
mm-hmm. the
basket of stuff.
Yeah, the works. That's right. It's a beautiful melting pot of, and I think that's
Yeah,
what makes neurodiversity so diverse and individual is the combination of what we have going on brings a uniqueness to everyone's personalities and our experience of the world as well. Like the intricate combinations of what's going on makes everybody incredibly fascinating. And you referred to ADHD NZ, who you're writing the blog for. You have an association with them, and
yeah.
how did that come about? That's my segue into what's your journey with ADHD.
Okay. So yeah, I guess I'll start with. It's funny. My journey with ADHD started when I was 7.
Uh-huh.
And my parents came home from school, and I got a good telling off, apparently.
Right.
I was told that I wasn't concentrating. I was told that I needed to do better, and I wasn't doing well enough, and so forth and so on. Well, I considered myself to be a good child.
Uh-huh.
So I marched myself into my room, and I had a good think. And I came back and I said to one of my parents, I know what the problem is. I can't concentrate.
Mm.
And then what happened next is very, very common for many of us. A parent turned around and looked at me and said, then try harder.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Not helpful. Okay. And so what happens is for many of us growing up, we are trying awfully hard, but the problem is we don't even know what trying hard means.
Mm.
We can't tell the difference between when we're trying hard and when we're not, because we're always trying hard
Yeah.
and it's not working out. So, oh, I failed out of that year, and I failed out of that year, and then I did really great, and then I did really, great, real classic ADHD kind of mixture of success and failure, and you're
Mm.
really bright, and why can't you do better, and blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah. But I managed to get into university, and I finished university, and um, so, marriage and children, and here I am. I ended up homeschooling my kids because I just didn't feel like the school was going to work out for them. And so here I am. I'm at an age where the kids really don't need me hovering around anymore. They've
Right.
decided to finish school at college, and I'm like, what do I do with myself? Well, I knew there's a lot of things I wasn't going to do because I was already aware of my ADD. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll go back a little bit. So the book Driven to Distraction by Ned Hallowell had
Uh-huh.
come out. And a friend of mine said, oh, you should read this book. I think this is me and it might be you. And I read the book and it's like, oh, right. Because I've been telling people for years, there's something wrong here. There's something amiss. And so I booked in with a psychiatrist. This is locally in the US. And she was willing to concede that maybe I had this ADHD after I'd explained it. But she still diagnosed me with depression and gave me some medication that was ridiculously unhelpful.
Mm.
So when we shifted here to New Zealand, I was really ready to trial medication.
Mm-hmm.
So I got diagnosed a second time, and it was a super interesting experience. I didn't choose to stay on it. And then some years later, I decided to take a university course. And so I thought, well, let's try this again. I'm going to go all academic here. Let's try this again. So I got diagnosed a third time.
With
And
with ADHD?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I didn't really think medication did all that much for me at that time either. So I was kind of, here I am. I'm in my 50s. I'm casting around for what do I do? I'm not going to get into a job where I have to do admin. Nobody wants that. And especially me. And I decide, okay, ADHD coach. All right, sounds good. So I take the training and I start my little business, ADHD Sorted. And things start off rather slowly. I'm still casting around because it didn't quite meet all the needs of my clients and me. There was something limited there. Won't go into the whole story, but at one point, I think this is critically important to understand, and I think it's a key thing that a lot of us with ADHD need to do. I was still trying so hard not to be ADD.
Yeah, right.
And it wasn't working. It was never going to work. And I was sort of running here and there. Well, what if I do this? And what do I do this? And I'm thinking, well, how much does that cost? And how much time is it going to take? And will I be able to make a living at it? And all these questions. And then finally, I just said, stop. Just stop. Stop everything. And I just spent as much time as I needed just being present with me. I was learning about myself. How do I function? And it finally hit me. It took a couple months, but it finally hit me. Oh, anything I do has to be creative.
Yeah.
So by the end of the week, I was enrolled at Wycliffe doing a clinical arts therapy master's.
What does that involve?
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
I took the first year was a PG dip and completed that, and then went on to the 2-year master's program. So an arts therapist is a psychotherapist basically, but we're trained to use these sort of visual means. It's not just visual, but anything like oh great, the word just went right out of my head.
But it would be incredibly helpful for someone with ADHD, right? Being visual thinkers.
Yeah, exactly. It certainly can be. And also incredibly useful for working with children.
Right.
Because children don't want to they can't really sit down and have a chat with you about what it's like for them in school. You know what I mean? It's not something they want to do. But there's all kinds of fun, creative things we can do. And together we sort of get to a point where we kind of have an understanding. So yeah, master's in creative arts therapy. Now I'm a therapist. Yay, off I go.
Off you go. And how long have you been doing this?
I think about 7 years.
Okay, yeah. Given like you've got very interesting experience and background in I guess the US experience, but also the New Zealand experience, and yes, you've been here for 15 years. What do you see any? Are there any differences? Are there any parallels? Is there any better or worse operating models or experiences for people with ADHD in the US versus New Zealand? Or are there aspects of the system in the US that we should adopt more of, or just blatantly ignore as well because it's not helpful? What's your take on that?
So my experience with it in the US was extremely limited. Like I said, I went to see a psychiatrist. I had to explain to her what ADHD is. So it's interesting to note how far we've come in such a long time, in such a short time, I should say.
Yeah.
Nobody doesn't know about ADHD now, interestingly. But how it's managed in the US, the thing is that the US is such a huge country that I don't know. First of all, I don't really know how it is in the US, and it'll be vastly different, I'm sure, from, I don't know, state to state,
Sure.
country, city. It'll be a wide range, but there certainly is a lot of understanding. It's in the news all the time, and we have organizations in the U.S. like CHAD,
Mm-hmm.
and and also Attitude Magazine,
Yeah.
and all these things. And there's all the big ADHD coaching associations and things like that. So there's heaps going on, but again, huge country.
Mm. How do you think we're doing here?
Well, there is an incredible shortage of access
Mm.
to diagnosis, and the route to getting medication, I think, is too hard.
Yeah.
And that's true in the U.S. as well. There's the same sort of strictures in there too. So yeah, it's not good enough.
No. No. No.
It's
No.
not good enough.
Yeah, and it's and for change to happen, there's a whole lot of advocacy that needs to go on, and probably a bunch of lobbying as well. But and especially in the state of the world and New Zealand with COVID, with a series of events over the last decade which have put a lot of pressure on our mental health system. There's and with a finite health fund, the opportunity for prioritizing ADHD over other things, which is troublesome in having to sort of triage and compare and go, well, actually, where's the best bang for our buck? Doesn't help. And but there's definitely, as you alluded to right at the start, Brett, there's definitely a mental health association component, tail to ADHD, isn't there? Is when people feel like they're struggling, don't necessarily know why, the impact on mental health is huge. So do you think that more accurate diagnosis would help with the mental health impacts, or are we, and is it a case of managing the symptoms rather than the cause, or what's your take on those sorts of things, given you've got some people who are showing up to you who are really struggling versus others who are just saying, I've just had enough of this, if I could just have some strategies around how to handle this. Yeah.
Sure. Hey, look, I mean, like I said earlier, on one hand, for a lot of people with ADHD, it's a non-issue.
Mm.
Okay, I'm a little messy. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
I forget my keys from time to time. No problem.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, it can definitely be a life ruiner, and it's not necessary.
Yeah.
It's incredibly treatable.
Mm.
I find the experience I'm seeing with my clients is that they might get in with a psychologist, psychiatrist, and they may get diagnosed, and they may trial medication. But on the whole, these clinicians don't really understand what to tell them to do next.
Right.
They don't really understand. They can't, some more than others, okay? But a lot of times these individuals don't really know. And a lot of them will say, maybe go talk to a coach. So, which is, I think, is kind of interesting, because it's like, I don't know, I feel like there's a whole process approach to this needs to be redefined. First of all, I think ADHD kind of doesn't really fit neatly into a mental health category.
Oh, totally.
It can become a mental health category, but I don't think it fits neatly in it.
I agree.
It's kind of in its own, sort of in a category of its own. But what if you went to a doctor, right? And the doctor's like, this is a limited metaphor, but oh yeah, you definitely give you a test. Yep, definitely you have diabetes. Okay, we're going to give you some insulin. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Check back in 6 weeks and tell us how it goes.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like that's ridiculous, And that's kind of how ADHD is being approached.
Yeah, and that's the reason why there's a need for your services, because you fill that gap. You're the okay, what next? Which is the practical, which is the okay. We have this confirmation, this diagnosis, and maybe there's a prescription for some medication, but it's like, okay, what do I actually do? Because the pill doesn't solve everything. The pill gives you an opportunity to then, I guess, as you say, go inward and notice.
Yeah.
And then do something about it. But the pill is it's not the answer. It's not the solution to your troubles. It can be a minimizer of what's going on, but it's not the solution, right?
Well, as they say, pills don't teach skills.
There you go. Nice.
And for most of us who've been limited by ADHD in some way for many, many, many years since childhood, we haven't had a chance to develop those strategies. Now, let me hasten to add here, there are a lot of people out here who simply just take the pill and they're fine. But obviously, like I said, they don't call me. Why would they?
Uh-huh.
It's the people who are trialed medication and it's still not quite there yet. And I like how you say, what do I do next? Because I also think of how I approach this as simply, I'm the person I needed
Right.
20 years ago.
Yeah. So there's a
When I
big
was
empathy
going,
piece to your work, isn't there? You get what's going on for the people who come to you.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I had an individual pay me the ultimate compliment, I thought. We're discussing an issue and we're going back and forth and back and forth, and it's a good discussion. And he looks at me and he goes, "You didn't learn this from a book, did you?" And he's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't.
Okay. Do you have maybe some? Would you be willing to share some common strategies that you use with some clients who come to you? Some tips. What are the most often used strategies that you deploy with people you assist? Have you got any tips for people there? Maybe not necessarily who are struggling, but those who are operating well but want to go, okay, how do I really hack my ADHD?
Okay, so a couple of things here. So like I said earlier, I think of what I do with my clients as building a bespoke engine. Okay, and what I mean to suggest by that is there's a lot of parts to this, and all these different parts do slightly different things, but they all work together. So a lot of times when I'm working with parents, because I work with children as well, is I'll make a suggestion and I'll say, "Oh, we tried that strategy. It didn't work." Well, look, if you drop a strategy in here and a strategy in there, okay, yeah, chances are it is going to fall over because the approach needs to be holistic. Okay, there's a part of it that's about really shifting your attitude towards what do you expect and how do you expect to go around about it. It's a shift in looking at strategies. It's not like they either work or they don't work. They are, okay, well, part of this worked and what part didn't. How do we tweak this? Or maybe you're on a revolving schedule of strategies. Well, that worked for a week. What are we doing this week?
Which is typical ADHD, right? Making
exactly.
Habit change is hard.
Well, and that's where medication can be helpful. Taking medication is often really helpful when you're at a point in your life when you're like, I'm ready to change how I approach things. Okay, so there's a lot of pieces to this. They're layered and we get them integrated, thus the engine. So yeah, tips and strategies, yeah, absolutely. But they don't make up a whole engine that's going to actually get you moving along.
Sure.
And there's just, a lot of pieces to this. But what I wanted to say, which I think is so wonderful about your approach to looking at the positives, the people who come to me are often a little discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they kind of have gone a few rounds with trying to do things. It's just not working out. And I, at the very least, I want my clients to leave the first session feeling hopeful.
Right. Yeah.
Because what I say to them is, look, we don't want you to change. The world needs you as you are,
Mm-hmm.
because your uniqueness is needed, right? We call it neurodiversity because, you know, it sounds like biodiversity, all right? We need all the pieces. We need all the ways of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
the original thinking, the outside of the box thinking, you know, I mean, this like, it's all needed.
Yeah.
But it's like having a superpower. We got to get that under control.
Yes. Absolutely.
You know, and
Yeah.
under the individual's control. So, and that's about managing, it's about tuning into you, your brain, your body. When am I feeling stressed?
Mm-hmm.
What do I tend to do when I'm feeling stressed? When am I not paying attention? And when, you know, what do I need? And it's about being able to help the people around us to understand
Mm.
how to work with us.
And I really do like and support the reference to a superpower. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's better, but there's an ability to do some things that most people can't, or in a way that most people can't. And I also like how you've added to that by saying we can overdo it, and it's not helpful, because there's a power in that, but also it means that sometimes that's overwhelming for everyone else around us, not just ourselves, right? And we can be hard work, or when we overdo things, people don't understand, or they don't get it, or they're not as quick as we are to get to that solution or that idea,
Yes.
and can't join the dots the way we have. And
Yep.
often, certainly what I find is I may have an idea that joins up a number of things that other people can't see, but I can't explain that. And that's one of my frustrations, is I don't know how it's just a case of saying, just trust me, it will work. And that takes a leap of faith for a lot of people to go, "Hey, I'm not sure, because I don't see how you're going to pull this off."
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it's taking people along, or slowing
Yeah.
down and working at their speed as well,
Right.
which is useful.
Yeah, exactly. And a big part of what I do, again, is helping my clients to sort of recover. A lot of what I do, I think of as being recovery from ADD.
Okay.
Um, yeah, because again, you know, we're not going to cure it, and we don't want to,
No.
but we want to recover our sense of self. We want to recover our self-esteem. We want to recover our yeah, and come from this a point of confidence, a point of actually, I'm awesome.
Yeah.
Always have been, always will be. Now we're working with brain.
So yeah, absolutely. Oh, this is
Yeah.
beautiful. So do people come to you not thinking they're awesome, not having sense of confidence?
Usually.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's
Usually there's this sense that I'm somehow or another I'm deficient, or
Yep.
I'm not quite good enough.
wrong,
I
broken.
mean, you know, you struggle, right? Intentions, outcomes, not happening. Yeah, that's going to impact your self-esteem.
Mm.
And as humans, we are going to look around and compare ourselves to others, and we are going to sort of make up this story about how everybody can do this better than I can.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? So yeah, it's going to affect, you know, your sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you know, key to this is restoring this idea, I'm awesome. And so I think of what I do also as a kind of an informal approach to what's called dialectical behavior therapy, which is a sort of an offshoot of cognitive behavior therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And the dialectical is that separation between me and everything I am that makes me awesome. My desire to do well, my moral compass, my you know, my keenness to just be you know, do these great things. And then there's brain over here. And we have this ability, as humans, we have this marvelous ability to witness what brain is doing.
Mm.
You know, and I talk about developing awareness. What is my brain occupied with?
Yeah.
What am I doing with my body?
Mm.
Oh, I'm ping-ponging around, not getting anything done. Okay. and what are my emotions and feelings.
Yeah.
And then once you sort of pause and check in and what's going on with me, oh, okay, I see what's happening here.
Mm.
And that's that ability to witness yourself with a certain sense of I'm okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So there's a reframing and there's a mindset that you need to take into. We need to take into this and this inquiry, don't we? Because if we start from the I'm broken, I'm wrong, something's not right, there's something that I can't fix. Getting past that is a whole lot of work. But when you tip over that, literally the world's your oyster, right? There's so much potential in what we can do, what we can harness.
Yeah,
If we stop the comparing, if we stop the worrying and the ruminating on what's not going right and focus on, well, what do I do right? What does that look like?
exactly.
Yeah.
And when you can come from that point of a little bit more confidence, we've just released this huge burden. And it's the burden of, the worrying and the rumination, as you say, that is really, it's like a psychic load.
Yeah.
You're carrying this like ball and chain around with you. And when you could just set that down,
Mm-hmm.
just set that down,
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot more capacity now to be creative and think of ways to get around it and things like that. And what you were saying before ties into this idea that when you can come from a position of actually, I'm awesome, we're in a much better position now to actually be patient with ourselves
Yeah.
and also be patient with others.
Mm.
So it's like in my partnership, I'm so grateful when my partner reminds me of things,
Mm-hmm.
but when he reminds me of things I hadn't forgotten, I have to be patient.
Yeah. 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 That's quite real. Um, okay. One final question for you, Brett, and feel free to add to this if there's anything else you want to mention or have said. This is your opportunity. But often with ADHD, we talk about our creative abilities, our abilities to hyper focus on the things that we're interested in and passionate in, and a number of other things. What do you think are the lesser known amazing qualities, superpowers, gifts, talents, traits of ADD and ADHD?
The lesser known ones.
Just so we can get some more out there.
Each individual is so unique, and I've met so many people through my work, and I not met one yet that didn't do something extraordinarily well.
Mm.
And when an individual can kind of, as they put down that baggage of, trying to be other than the way they are, and they focus on, okay, who I am, and what makes me go, what gives me that dopamine,
Yeah.
what really just lights me up, and if you think of the unique standard shift, what for me is the gas, the petrol. Okay, and you get that out in front.
Mm.
Okay, don't, we get caught up in, yes, but how much is that going to cost, and can I make money at it, and so those things kind of take care of themselves.
Yeah.
When we get that dopamine out in front.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, and we follow our passion, basically, whatever it is that makes us go, that's when our genius emerges.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when our superpower emerges. That's when we bring our strengths. And a lot of people come to me, looking at a career move, or maybe they're not really in the right work for them. And with these people, I say, look, what is it that you do so well, or that you don't have to go and look for a job that'll take you. You get yourself out in front of the person that has been waiting for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Here I am, I've arrived, you're welcome. You know what I mean? And that, and I know that what I'm hinting at here is a really a quantum shift in how business looks at staffing.
Absolutely. And I think this is the turning point. I think this is actually the impetus behind this podcast as well. Is so we're focused on the great things that ADHD allows adults to do and in their profession. Now, that is to say that there are a whole lot of barriers, and how we manage, how we construct and organise our workplaces is based on an approach to working and living and experiencing the world and the workplace that those of us with ADHD don't necessarily experience, right? And so we're on the outers, we're at the edges of the bell curve, and I totally agree that we do need to change our approach. The interim step is, how do we operate in ways that that work for us in a system that doesn't work for us? And
Self-advocate.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Self-advocate.
And I think tying back to what you've just said, Brett, is to self-advocate, we also need to find the thing that we are passionate about, so that work doesn't feel like work. So do the thing that's easy, that feels natural, if you've got the opportunity, right? And that doesn't necessarily need to be your occupation. It could be something that you volunteer with or do in the community, or whatever it is, maybe an evening class or something like that. But find the thing that lights you up, and that you're so interested in that you can't do without, and see where that takes you.
Yeah.
There's an option.
Exactly. And when it comes to work, and I talk to my clients quite a bit about this. The idea is that we're all supposed to be this sort of Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
We're creative, and we, communicative, and we do our admin, and we do, the paperwork or whatever. And that's fine. That creates a certain kind of workflow or whatever. But we're not all built like that.
No.
And to be able to go in and say to your manager or your team member or your boss, look, we both want the same thing. We both want this project or whatever to go swimmingly well. Okay, here's the dilemma. As long as I also need to do this isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Here's the help I need. If you can get Harry, who seems to just bleed this kind of thing, to do that bit, I'll run with this. And here's the deal. You do this for me, and we will, we'll finish early. And you can only do that if you're coming from a place of a reasonable amount of self-confidence and self-knowledge.
Self-knowledge, absolutely.
Nowhere in there is I've got ADD. Nowhere in there. Nothing in that was anything but valid and reasonable.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Not issue.
That's wonderful.
Not issue.
No, and it shouldn't be. Oh man, it shouldn't be.
Doesn't need to be.
Okay, Brett, where can viewers and listeners to this find you, and what's the best way of contacting you, and what do you want them to contact you about?
Well, if you're having difficulty making your intentions match your outcomes.
There we go. And they find you where?
Well, there's my website, ADHD Sorted.
.co.nz or .com?
That's right. It's .com.
Okay, very good.
ADHDsorted.com.
And there must be a link to an email or contact opportunity there?
There is a submission page, I believe is what it's called. And you contact me through that, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Very
good. Brett Harrington, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning. We've so at the time of recording this, we've just ticked over daylight savings time, so struggling. And do you think, actually, very, very quick question, do you think ADHD is are affected more or less, not at all, by the switch in daylight savings time? Is that a thing, do you think?
Look, I think the difference between those of us with ADD and everybody else is tiny. Okay, so if your listeners could see me, I'd be holding my fingers very close together. Okay, however, that little bit impacts everything.
Yes. That's
Okay.
gold.
So if it impacts us, it impacts everybody.
Yeah.
But for us, it may just be a few degrees more intense.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I hope you have, on a positive note, a few degrees more intense day. Brett, it's been wonderful chatting with you. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge and expertise.
Thank you. It's
And
been a pleasure.
look forward to staying in touch.
I love
And
that.
we'll talk again soon. Thanks.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Well, there you have it. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the You, Me and ADHD podcast. My hope is that it's been worth your time, of some value, that it's been interesting or even enlightening. Perhaps. Hey, if nothing else, I hope it's been entertaining. I really appreciate you showing up. You see, I really want to do some serious damage to the stigma and stereotype that ADHD is bad, that it's wrong, and that those of us born with ADHD brains are somehow broken, because we're none of those things. And you can help with this too. If you were to like, comment, or even share a link to any one of these episodes or the entire podcast, just to one person, I'll be a happy little ADHD camper. And I love camping. I do. So thanks for stopping by. I hope to see you soon. Stay in touch. Get in touch in any way you feel the need. And I look forward to chatting. Until then, peace, love, and heaps of impulsivity. Take care.